Jeramy Carl Burt was a 33-year-old from Boise, Idaho. He was a carpenter and father, and when tempted to lie in court, Jeramy testified against a lawyer who forged a judge's signature. On the night of February 11th, 2007, he left his father's house, seemingly to meet someone. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Listen to the preceding episode of Unfound, The Disappearance of Erin Barnard, then I suggest you stop this podcast right now and do so. Myself and my guest will be talking about his disappearance, and I don't want anyone to be lost as we go over very important information regarding Jeramy's case and how it relates to Erin's. But why? Why are we talking about them together? Because Jeramy and Erin knew each other. They weren't best friends. In fact, no one is even sure the last time they ran into each other before Erin disappeared. But for two people who knew each other, even just casually, to disappear at separate times, we must explore whether the two cases are related. It may help the families, it may help the police, and as the public, it may help us become more educated on disappearances in general. Also, we're continuing the theme of cause and effect with Jeramy's case. Could it be that Erin's disappearance wasn't just an effect, but that in a roundabout way, it caused Jeramy Burt to become a missing person? Meaning, would Jeramy Burt not have disappeared if Erin Barnard hadn't disappeared? I'd like you to think about that. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's site, charlieproject.org. Jeramy Burt was last seen leaving his father's house on Hervey Street in Boise, Idaho at 10:30 p.m. on February 11th, 2007. At the time of his disappearance, Jeramy was living with his father, his baby daughter, and his ex-wife, although they continued to have a cordial relationship. On the night in question when he left, Jeramy was dressed as if he were going out on a date, wearing a nice sweater and pants. He was also driving his wife's car, a red Mercury Cougar. He told no one where he was going, and his cell phone records do not indicate that information. He was never seen again. However, at some point after he left the house, Jeramy texted his wife, who was in Las Vegas for a convention. He told her he was planning to disappear and start a new life. Yet, just a day before that, during a phone conversation with his wife, Jeramy said he wanted to come join her in Las Vegas, an idea she rejected. 3 months later, the car Jeramy was driving was found in a remote area of Idaho, several miles from where he lived. This area was not familiar to Jeramy, and he had no reason to be out there. The car had been torched, and no forensics could be gathered from it. Complicating this case is that Jeramy had reignited a relationship with Jeannie, a Boise lawyer, not long before he disappeared. This is strange because Jeramy's testimony back in 2003 sent Jeannie to jail for forging a judge's signature. Jeannie, at the time, had tried to get Jeramy and Erin Barnard to claim that Jeannie's assistant had committed the crime. Jeramy secretly recorded Jeannie coercing him and Erin to lie. And although Erin didn't testify, Jeramy did, thus putting Jeannie, his girlfriend at the time, in jail. But in 2006, they started seeing each other again once she got out of prison, with Jeramy trying to hide it from his wife. Interestingly, Jeramy's wife got married 3 months after Jeramy disappeared, before the torched car was found, and remember, it was hers. She and Jeannie, along with others, have been investigated regarding Jeramy's disappearance, but nothing has been solid to this point. Jeramy's family doesn't believe he would have abandoned his daughter. They suspect foul play. The interview for this episode is with Marky Davis, the private investigator for the Burt family. Unfound news. I got the first Unfound t-shirt sample in the mail. Yes, like everything else, I'm designing them myself. And it was not a success. The logo and the picture look really good. In fact, I wore the shirt for the Facebook Live show this past week. If you haven't seen it yet, The shirt is black with the Unfound logo on the front and Jesse Foster's picture on the back. But they're crooked. So I've had a discussion with the t-shirt company. They apologized and are sending me another one free of charge. Let's see if they can get it right the second time. Next, we're slowly inching toward the end of the month when the first missing persons article will be published by Total Media with some help from Unfound. I think we've picked out a solid Western Pennsylvania case, and for me, it's a disappearance I didn't know about until very recently. I really want all of you listeners to support Total Media's venture into this because there are very few, if any, major media companies that are doing what they'll be doing. They deserve our support. Finally, I hope you will check out the article that was done recently on the creator of charlieproject.org, Megan Good. You know, she is a friend of Unfound, has been on this program, and supports it in many ways. You can find the story featuring her at longreads.com. That's LONGREADS.com. And hey, I even get quoted. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound is on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Podomatic, Stitcher, Podbean, and Spotify. Email the program, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. The website, unfoundpodcast.com. Please check out the Secret Stephen Kocher episode. The website at Total Media, triblive.com/news/unfound. Unfound has Patreon and PayPal accounts. I want to thank recent contributors Vicky and Sarah. Unfound merchandise. Volume 1 is on Amazon in both paperback and ebook form, and you can go to makeplayingcards.com to find the Unfound poker playing cards. And please mention Unfound on all true crime Facebook pages and other websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the private investigator for the Burt family, Marky Davis. Marky, welcome to Unfound.
Well, thank you for having me, Ed. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Marky, why don't you first tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I've become a private investigator in 2005, and at that time I was interning, and my sponsor asked me to do a case where her husband's grandmother had gone missing in 1939. And so it led to a murder victim in West Virginia where the FBI got involved and the body was exhumed, DNA was taken, and that's that story. So that took me 2 years, and then I apprenticed for a while and doing regular PI stuff. And on the side, I was doing missing persons. And so in 2007, I met a group of parents of missing people, including Cheryl Burt, and we were on MySpace and in another forum-type chat room. And so we met that way. And so we followed each other's missing person cases, and then we found Facebook, and the whole world of the missing opened up for everybody.
It did.
And yeah, it did. It was amazing. So that's so I've been doing missing people for a long time, different organizations, and then 3 years ago, I'm founder and CEO of a organization called We Help the Missing. And so we volunteer to help the missing. And we're made up of PIs, parents of missing people, a lawyer, ex-law enforcement. And so, and we join up with a biker group that gets out there right away as soon as we get a location, and they do postering up in the neighborhoods. So anyway, that's kind of how that works.
And you have a website, wehelpfindthemissing.org? Is that what it is?
No, wehelpthemissing.org.
Wehelpthemissing.org is your website for what you do. Okay.
Yes. So if anybody has a missing person, they can go ahead and just fill out an intake on there and look around our site and see kind of who we have missing, who we've located, and sadly are memorials, so they're
Okay.
welcome to bring their missing person to us.
Okay. So through all of this, you ran into the Burt family. You met them, and they approached you. They asked you to look into it. Did you ask them like
Oh,
permission, or how
well,
did that work?
no, so I was working a case. The young man, teenager, in Cedar City, Utah, had gone missing, and Cheryl Burt and I became acquainted online, and she was interested in my case, and of course I was interested in her son's case, and that's kind of how we met up over the internet. Since then, of course, we've met face to face and all that, but ever since 2007, we've begged law enforcement in Boise to let me help with the case, and they'd say no, no, no. So in 2014, they finally said yes. And so that's how I became their official PI.
And when you were first presented with all of the information that the Burts gave you, maybe you did get some other information from other avenues or whatever. What was your first impression as a private investigator of this case? Do you remember?
You mean that there was a lot of information, for one, that I had to dig through?
That is true. That's probably would have been my first knee-jerk reaction as well. There's a lot of information. That's right.
Right. And a lot of people to talk to, and just getting to know Jeramy, who he was to different people, kind of fills in the blanks of who he was in, in total.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a process. Plus, since then I've also worked full time, so we're kind of slower going with this than I'd like.
And so you've known the Burts since 2007, and then I guess officially what you would say is in 2014 when the police started opening up a little bit, you've been hard on it since 2014.
Right.
Okay, great.
They also would not give me any information, so I've had to pretty much start from scratch. So the police I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Which is pretty normal for law enforcement in an active case with a private investigator.
That I've learned that as well. I agree. And what have you learned about Jeramy yourself? If you were to explain him to the listeners, what have you learned about him in the last almost 10 years or 10 years?
It has been, going on 11.
Going on 11. Yeah.
February. Anyway, Jeramy was a loving son, father, brother, cousin, nephew, all those other things that we all know. He worked in the construction business as a roofer. He loved and was committed to, above all, his daughter Mackenzie. He was a doting father, and he liked to hunt. He loved his new bow that he had just bought to go. He was going to go bow hunting, and he just liked the outdoors, and he liked to hike sometimes, and he was very well respected in the roofing construction business.
Would you say in general that he was a pretty good guy? Was from what you've learned, just to ask you point blank, was he involved in anything illegal or suspicious over his life, anything like that you found out? If you can talk about that.
He was a good guy, and he didn't do much wrong, as far as legal stuff. He was straightforward. He preferred talking on the phone or face to face than texting or email or anything like that. He was a face to face, upfront person. He was kind of assertive, not aggressive or mean in any way, but he was forthright and kind of a workaholic in a way. When he committed to something, it was all out. He and Kim did do some private dancing, like for bachelor and bachelorette parties, which is really the most shady thing I've found. You know, he did hang out in a club once in a while, go to have a beer, but as far as doing drugs or being an alcoholic or into gangs or any of that, that was not Jeremy.
Not Jeramy at all.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Okay. Now we're going to just identify a couple people. If you've already said Kim's first name, but we just need to identify so the listeners know a couple people that are going to be integral to this entire interview. The first person, let's just go, being that you just mentioned her. Who is Kim? Who was she in, and what was her relationship with Jeramy?
Okay, Kim was Jeramy's second wife, also the mother of his daughter. They had kind of an off and on relationship, and they really tried to work it out a few times, and then things would go sour, and then they try and work it out. And at the time that he went missing, they were trying to work it out. Okay. I don't know too much about her. She was a smart girl. She got her master's, I heard, in accounting, but somebody else just told me it was in marketing, so I'll have to follow up on that. But she was very smart. But yet she didn't apply that for a while to business. She went to work at Red Lobster, and so that nobody really understands why she didn't follow through. But she was very tight with money and good with it, where Jeramy, on the other hand, was not. If he had money, he spent it. If he didn't, he either struggled or tried to find it somewhere, like loans and things like that. And
so the money kind of would burn a hole in his pocket if he held on to it too long.
Yeah, right away.
Okay.
And Kim, she was a good mom. There were rumors that she maybe drank a little bit too much, but other than that, there was no other problems with her either.
And do you know how long those two had been married when Jeramy disappeared?
I don't exactly recall the dates that they had gotten married, but they had been together at least 3 or 4 years, because Kim was pregnant with Mackenzie when they got married, and she was about 3 when he disappeared.
Okay, so maybe they might have been married 3 years or something like that. About.
Yeah.
So maybe they got married in 2004 sometime.
I'm thinking 2004 is about the right date.
Okay. But you said they had some ups and downs. But at the time that Jeramy disappeared, they were trying to work it out.
Yes, they had been divorced. They had gotten divorced. She was living in the house. And at the time that he disappeared, she was trying to sell the house, and she and Mackenzie had moved in the apartment with Jeramy and Van. Van is Jeramy's dad, Van Burt.
Right. Okay. So they got divorced, but they were trying to get back together, maybe trying to rekindle the relationship, maybe because they had a child together.
Right. And, they were in love. There was that part of it. And they really wanted to work out, because really the problems were money, and every couple struggles with that. And he felt like she drank too much, and she had cut back on that. So, and it wasn't like she'd get so inebriated that she turned into somebody else or evil person. He just didn't want her to drink that much.
Okay.
And so.
Now, who is Jeannie Braun?
Jeannie, oh my. She.
First of all, maybe we start this way. How did Jeramy and Jeannie meet?
Jeramy was married when he was in the Navy. He was married in California, but the girl was from Japan, and he had met her in Japan when he was stationed over there. And he brought her back to the United States. Her name was Rena Suzuki. And she came here, and they just culturally, not that they didn't get along, but culturally she could not adapt. And so she went back to Japan. And by this time, Jeramy and Kim were wanting to get married, and he couldn't do that because he was still married to Rena. And so he went to Jeannie Braun, who handled a lot of marriages and divorces and things like that, and marriage situations like custody and all that. And so he went to Jeannie for his divorce, and that's how they met.
And did she take care of that? Do you think that Jeramy was pleased with how she handled the divorce proceedings so he could divorce this woman from Japan?
He was. And during the time that they were going through the paperwork, Jeannie was soliciting or seducing him. And like she would buy him nice watches and all kinds of gifts, and it became a sexual relationship.
So even though he was getting divorced from his first wife, and then there was Kim, the Jeannie tried kind of put herself in the middle of this as well.
And she did. She succeeded.
And she succeeded. Okay. So would you go as far to say, from what you understand regarding all of this, is that did Jeannie and Jeramy, were they actually a couple, or was this just a friends with benefits type of thing? How would you portray it?
They became an obsession, I would say, with each other, or at least with Jeramy. And I really think that she liked him too, was pretty stuck on him, but she also was not faithful. So we had the triangle with Jeannie and Kim and Jeramy, and then she also was seeing other people at the same time.
All right, so Jeannie had some other guys on the side as well.
Right.
Okay. Now, Jeannie herself, even though Jeramy might not have had any problems with the law, Jeannie did. She actually got in trouble for something that she did as a lawyer. None of us are lawyers here, or very few probably of the listeners as well. Just in a very small capsule, what did she do to get sent to jail, and when did that happen?
In about 2004-ish, she actually forged a judge's signature on a divorce case. And there were some other things that are pretty much not right, not legal, and against the law. But she, the main thing is that she forged the judge's signature on this divorce.
Right, and that's what eventually got her sent to jail sometime in 2004, 2005.
Right, 2004, I think.
2004, and do you know how long she was in there, in jail?
She was in there until July of 2006.
Okay, so she spent some good time behind bars, at least over a year. And I remind the listeners that Jeramy disappeared on February 11th, 2007. So she was out of jail for about 6, 7, 8 months, somewhere in there, before Jeramy disappeared.
Right.
But do you know if he kept in contact? And we're going to get into how she ended up going to jail in a bit, but did the two of them keep in contact with each other after she went to jail? Do you know?
As far as I know, well, I don't know. I don't know anything about that, and nobody that I have interviewed knows whether he did or not.
Okay. So we move up.
I do know.
Please, Marky, please.
I do know that when she got out of jail, it wasn't long before she was looking Jeramy up. She would show up at the job site. She would bring him lunch. him and Van, Jeramy's dad, she would show up at the apartment, and Van mentioned to me at one point she did spend the night at their apartment.
Okay.
So she didn't take long to start chasing Jeramy again.
And this is unusual for what reason?
Well, he testified in the grand jury and had recorded conversations with her that implicated her in the forgery of the judge's signature and other things that she was doing. And he testified at the grand jury and helped to convict her. And so that's what makes it unusual, is that she gets out of jail and it succumbs to her seduction again. And so that makes that really strange.
And on top of that, he was recording the conversations that he was having with Jeannie as well.
Yes. And that came about...
Secretly.
Yes, covertly he was doing that.
Okay. So just to line this all up, Jeramy meets Jeannie because of his divorce. They begin this relationship, and then he finds out that she had forged a judge's signature, and he starts recording conversations, and then ultimately he was the one who testified against her that actually got her sent to jail for over a year.
Right. He was one of the people.
One of the people, probably a few. Okay.
Right.
I have to ask, did anybody in Jeramy's family, worry about this? Here he was going back to having a relationship with a woman that he sent to jail. If you can, I'd never ask you to reveal anything that was confidential, but was his mother worried about it? Was his father, other family members, were they worried about this?
Oh, of course. At this point, they're not very happy that he was seeing her, and they worried. They worried that something might happen.
Mm-hmm. Maybe fearing that Jeannie might, maybe try to get it. I have to admit, it's one of the strangest things I've ever heard.
Right.
I have to admit, and I've heard a lot on Unfound so far in the last plus year. That
Actually, Jeramy is the one that mentioned that he had found out that Erin Barnard had gone missing, and he had mentioned to Shannon and we'll get into Shannon in a minute, but Shannon and Kent, that, Erin went missing. If anything happens to me, well, you'll know it wasn't an accident. Something to I'm paraphrasing, of course, but something to that effect. And that bothered Kim a lot. And she mentioned that in conversations with Shannon several times after Jeramy went missing.
Okay, we don't want to start throwing... Of course, the listeners, and I've already set this up before we started this interview, of possibility of Erin and Jeramy's disappearances being connected. And this is the first mention of Erin Barnard, a guy we talked about on last week's episode. And we're going to talk about him more in a bit. And we'll talk about Shannon in a little bit as well. But that was one of the things that was going on in Jeramy's life before he disappeared, that Jeannie was coming around. She was back in Jeramy's life.
Right.
And it doesn't sound to me like he minded it too much.
No,
okay.
He didn't at all. They picked up their sexual relationship right away.
Okay. And Kim and Jeramy, did Kim know about Jeannie at this time before Jeramy disappeared?
Yes, she did.
She did. And how did she feel about that if those two were trying to get back together, trying to work things out?
Well, she knew about Jeannie when they were still divorced and living apart. She knew about Jeannie. I think it took a little while for her to know about Jeannie before they started to reconcile, and then she didn't know about Jeannie while they were in his apartment and reconciling. She did not know that was going on again. So he kept that kind of under wraps
All right.
at that.
So Jeramy was essentially dating two women at one time
Yes, for quite a while.
for quite a while. Okay. And was there with Kim and Jeramy? They're trying to get back together. Any fighting for custody? Anything like that that was going on between them?
They shared custody, but when they were getting a divorce and going through their divorce and things like that, Jeramy was also, at the time he was recording Jeannie, he was recording Kim. Just in case there was a custody battle. You know, he was keeping track of things that probably Jeannie told him to keep track of and log all instances or all conversations and things like that. So he was recording her in case they did go to court over Mackenzie, the daughter.
So
But
Jeramy
up
was doing a
to-
lot of recording. He was talking to people and doing a lot of recording, even maybe not just on the phone or whatever, but in person as well.
Just kind of a cover your
Butt.
self.
Cover your butt.
Yeah, cover your butt situation. Yeah.
Okay. This is very interesting relationship these three had. You know, the lawyer Jeannie is advising Jeramy to record, you know, conversations with Kim in case anything pops up. But Jeannie's also one of the women who's having a relationship with Jeramy.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any other issues going on in Jeramy's life? Was he having, sounds like he was a little loose with his money, but any work issues, anything like that?
You know, he worked roofing and construction. Yeah, I mean, he mainly did roofing, but there was other times when he would do other, like, complete buildings. And so, as we most of us know, that the construction business is feast or famine.
It is.
Like, you have work and then you don't have work, and so it was up and down with him. And he, at that time he went missing, he was having some financial problems. Kim wasn't, but he was.
Right. Okay. Being that these two women, I guess, were competing for Jeramy's attention, did the two of them, Jeannie and Kim, ever have any? Did they even know about each other? Did they have any altercations? Did one ever threaten the other? Anything like that, to your knowledge, between Jeannie and Kim?
I don't think that they ever met face to face, and I don't think there were any altercations or, you know, girl cat fights or anything like that. I was told by a couple people that Jeannie stalked Kim, and then some others told me no, that didn't happen. So that's just kind of up in the air whether it did or not. And Kim actually told me that she had at one point, and that she had come to the house and she was there and knocked on the door, and Jeramy got rid of her. You know, what are you doing here? You need to go away, something like that.
All right. So we move up to the day that he disappeared, February 11th, 2007. What do we know about that day?
Okay, so that day, then we'll have to digress and go back to the night before to get
Okay,
there.
please.
Or the day before.
Okay.
So the day before, he had gone to Pocatello and Mountain Home. Mackenzie's grandmother lives in Pocatello. His mom lives in American Falls, which is right there close to Pocatello. Jeramy's cousin and lives in American Falls that is like his brother. And so he probably went to visit him. And then he probably visited his brother Shane. So while he was down there, they went visiting, and, you know, he took Mackenzie with him. And then he went back to Cheryl, his mother's house, and just kind of packed up their things and said he's going home. She tried to convince him to stay, but he wanted to get back to Boise. And so he got back to Boise, and he got a phone call, and he asked his dad if he could leave Mackenzie with his dad, you know, because she was already in bed, and that was fine. And so the next morning, Dan didn't think too much about it. Well, let me go on with what he was wearing. So Jeramy went in, took a shower. He kind of got spruced up with a turtleneck, either black or dark blue, and some dress slacks and dress shoes. He thinks, he's not sure about the shoes, but he would imagine with the dress slacks he'd wear not tennis shoes. And so Jeramy left in Kim's car, and he never came back. So the next morning, Van was kind of worried, but not too much, because he thought, well, Jeramy's kind of a ladies' man, and he might have found somebody and just spent the night. And so Van wasn't too worried until later in the day when he didn't show up at all.
Now let me ask you a few more questions about February 11th, just so we can understand some of this for the listeners. Jeramy never specifically said where he was going that night of February 11th. He never told his mother or anybody else where he was going?
He did tell his dad that he was going to talk to a friend of his. He was going to go over and talk to a friend of his about hunting.
And did Jeramy ever show up there? Did that conversation ever happen?
No, it did not. But the guy said he was already in bed, and Jeramy may have come over and he didn't hear him.
Very possible. And why did he take Kim's car? Did Jeramy not have his own?
At that time, his pickup had just been repossessed. He had gotten a title loan to tide him over until he could get some more work, and he ended up not being able to pay for it, and they repossessed his truck. So at that time, they were both using her car.
So, I mean, that to me sounds like some serious issues. That sounds to me like some serious money issues when somebody goes to a payday loan place or, gives their title to somebody to get a loan, and then he can't even pay the loan back and lose the car. That's some serious financial trouble.
Well, he would do that like between jobs, and then when he would get to work, then of course money was good and he'd pay it off. And so, just to tide him over until the next job. And that's kind of was not uncommon with him. So that's not something that would send him over the edge.
Okay. But
I mean.
I'm going to guess, though, is that the first time he ever had a car possessed? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. So that's why he had to take Kim's car, because his truck got repossessed. So if that's the only car they have, then he's taking that car. Did Kim allow him to drive her car, even though he lost his truck?
Yes. That was just they were getting back together, so they were a couple, and so that was an okay thing to do.
Okay. Now, maybe we need to explain this as well. Where was Kim at the time that Jeramy disappeared February 11th? Where was she?
She was in Las Vegas. It's purported that she was at a conference down there, training for something.
Okay. And how long was she down there? How many days was she down there before Jeramy disappeared? Had she just gotten down there the day before? And had they been calling or texting each other back and forth while she was there?
It was just a few days. I'm not sure on how many exactly, but it was just a few days, and she was to come home like the day after he disappeared. Which she did come home the day after he disappeared.
Okay. So she was in Las Vegas. So obviously he couldn't have been going out to see her that night because she was in Las Vegas. He's in Boise, Idaho. That's not possible. So we're just... Please?
He had called her and asked her if he could come down. And she said she had told him no at the time because she was in this conference and he would be sitting most of the time by himself. She just didn't think that was a good idea and that he would be bored out of his mind. In Las Vegas, I don't think so, but
I agree.
She just didn't feel like it was a good idea and didn't want to spend the money to do that.
So he goes out, doesn't come back. Next day, not exactly no yellow or red flags going up at that time, but he's gone, the car's gone. When did the Burt family start thinking that something wasn't quite right?
Well, his dad thought so by the afternoon the next day, because it wasn't like him to leave Mackenzie without notifying somebody. You know, he wouldn't just leave her with Dad for longer than maybe overnight and be back to take care of her when she, because she's sleeping overnight, so she wouldn't even know that he was gone. And so by the afternoon, Van's thinking, well, he didn't just go pick up a girl or something and spend the night. Something's going on, and he didn't, and Jeramy didn't call. So Van started worrying about it the next afternoon. Then Kim had gotten a text in Vegas, which she thought was Jeramy at first, and the text said that he was going to take off and start a new life and just leave. And so she was angry, very angry, and not thinking right, thinking maybe he had taken off with Jeannie or somebody else. And so she was mad, and she spent the whole next day just fuming while she was in Vegas. And then when she got home, she was mad. And then they decided to report him missing. And law enforcement didn't really take it serious. Adult male, they have the legal right to take off and not tell anybody. And so that was the attitude of law enforcement at the time. So she felt if she filed a report and said he'd stolen her car, they would treat it more urgently. And they did. They treated it like a stolen car, so they treated it more urgently and looking for him.
Yeah, that was. I guess that was kind of smart on her part to do that.
She was a smart girl.
So later that day, February, I guess it would be 12th, they start worrying. She gets back. Maybe we should make this clear. When did she get that text from Jeramy stating that, he was going to leave, take off, leave his life? Was that the night he disappeared that she got that?
Yes, it was. And it was towards the evening because she remembers she had finished up the class that day. And so it was towards evening when she got the text. The other odd thing about getting the text that she realized after she had calmed down and wasn't so mad, realized something was wrong, is that Jeramy wasn't a text person. He would call somebody or be face-to-face with them rather than text. He just wasn't, especially something important. He'd get right up and say it,
Mm-hmm. And are we sure that text that was sent to Kim was sent after Jeramy had already left his house in her car?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that was determined, that it was late.
Later. Okay. So the family's worried. The police finally get involved when Kim files a missing car report, a stolen car report. But I'm
Correct.
guessing the missing persons report was existed as well. But what got the police off their butts was looking for a stolen car. And
Right.
in those first few days, when did they start looking at like cell phone information, any financial information? How soon did they start doing that for the police?
They actually didn't do that until they found the car. So
Wow,
they treated it.
Wow, okay.
They treated it like the first detective kind of did mess around with it, but he never did triangulate the phones or ping the phone or check the phone or bank records. He mostly was doing that to see if he could get a clue where Jeramy'd gone with the car. So it wasn't really a missing persons case until they found the car.
All right, then let's go right to that, and then we'll come back to that information. So between February 11th, 2007, and the car was found in May. What went
Correct.
on? What was Kim doing? What was the Burt family doing? Were there any theories that were being tossed out? Did Jeannie come around looking for Jeramy? What do you know about those months between February and May?
They were just pretty concerned, and they were trying to get the police involved, and that wasn't happening. And so Van and a friend of his would go out, and kind of just look where Jeramy liked to go hunting and hiking. So Van and probably Shane too, I believe, Jeramy's younger brother, went out just hiking and looking around at some of Jeramy's favorite places. They were just getting very concerned, and the police weren't taking it as serious as they thought they should. And around that time is when Kim gets married to a friend of Jeramy's from American Falls.
So just to be clear, she gets married to another guy before her car is ever found concerning Jeramy's disappearance.
Right.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty quick. Did Kim and this guy have a relationship before Jeramy disappeared? What can you tell the listeners about that? What do you know?
No, I really don't know. There's quite a few stories, but I can't pin that down enough to give you a correct answer. They thought maybe they had been together. I think they knew each other from being from the same town, but I don't know if she was having a relationship with him prior to getting married or while Jeramy was around. I just don't know that, so I'm not going to confirm that.
Okay, but I guess what we're saying is that there is at least the possibility that although Jeramy might have been cheating on Kim to run around with Jeannie, it's possible that Kim might have been having some extracurricular activity with this guy on the side as well. It's a possibility. It sounds kind of fast to get married, especially since the guy that she was with has vanished and her car still hasn't been recovered yet either.
And she was angry, she still,
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't calm down right away. There was like this concern and calm down, flip-flopping like people in grief do. They're angry one minute and then they're questioning the next, and then they're trying to accept it the next, and it's just kind of a roller coaster of emotions. And so she did that, and one of the guesses about this other guy would be that she went to him for comfort, and he just wanted to take care of her. But they didn't know at this time Jeramy was not going to come back, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the perplexing question in all this is what if, the day before they're getting married, Jeramy would have popped up again. Say he just took off for a while and popped up. That would have been a very complex situation.
It would have been. Or even right after they got married. That would make it very... Yeah.
Yeah, that is, once again, something new to unfound a twist in all of this. So that's what happened. So this all happened between February and May. Now, Kim did a couple other things that maybe were a little suspicious, and we'll get to the car in a second. Did she have Jeramy's laptop?
She had all of Jeramy's stuff. She was moving into his apartment, and she did have his laptop.
And did she give it back? Was she reluctant to give anything up? What can you tell the listeners about any of that?
Okay, so she had the computer, and it's my understanding that after the police after they had found the car and the police started taking it more serious, they had asked about the laptop. And apparently she was reluctant to give it back. And when she did give it back, there were a lot of files missing. And I don't know why they didn't do forensics on the car, but that was a long time ago. I don't know how popular in Boise, Idaho, computer forensics were. And anyway, so...
if I may ask, where is that laptop now, 10 years later?
I think Carl Burt has it. Or maybe the police took it back from somehow it ended up with the police twice. Like it was given to Kim, and then they did get it back. And but Cheryl had it for a little bit, and they found some of the recordings that Jeramy had done on the computer, and that's when I believe the police got it back, and I think it's part of the evidence at this point.
Okay. And you said that there was some files that might have been deleted on this computer. Any kind of idea what those files might have been? Any suspicions at all, if you can say?
I don't have a clue what those would be. And the recorded digital files that he had on there were under like a generic name. Nobody really knew what exactly that was. I couldn't remember, but like you might name something you want to hide, bills or groceries or something. You know, he put it under a hidden name. Somebody would want to look into that file.
And those recordings were of what? And have you ever heard any of those recordings?
I have possession of copies of all of them. And
Okay.
they were conversations with Jeannie, conversations with other witnesses, conversations with Kim, you know, I told you that he was recording her just in case they went to custody battle.
Yeah.
And conversations with the finance company that repossessed his truck, you know, when he called them to have that discussion, like, why did you come and get this? And I told you I was going to pay, things like that, you know. So just to cover your butt file, like just in case he needed it later on. He didn't just randomly record everybody's conversation. It's just something he felt like he needed to cover his behind over.
And having listened to these conversations, what kind of time span would you say that these recordings were made over? How many months or years? Do you know?
It was from, I would say that it was close to a year that he recorded these. Of course, being copied and stuff like that, the time and date gets messed up. If you don't copy it just right, the time and date is the time and date that they got copied to a disk or another computer.
That's true.
And so we have the exact time and date on those. And of course, he didn't say this is March whatever 2004. You know what I mean?
Mm. But just to be clear, none of these recordings had anything to do with Jeannie going to jail back in 2004.
It was conversations with Jeannie regarding.
It was. So, see, what you're saying then, on this computer, there were recordings that went the whole way back to 2004, and there were also recordings that were as recently maybe as 2006.
Yeah.
So there were these recordings on the computer, and they went back as far as how long? The whole way back to when Jeannie, he was first recording her in preparation for her going to jail? Did the recordings go back that far?
They go back that far.
Okay. And would you say that there were also some recent ones maybe with Kim in 2006?
Yes.
Okay.
And with the repo people over his truck.
All right. So there were recordings that he had on this computer the whole way up till just about the time he disappeared. Do you have any idea on how he recorded these conversations? Did he record them over the phone, but did he record people in person as well?
He had a small digital recorder that he hid on his person somewhere, like in a pocket or taped to himself or somewhere.
And do you believe that he took that recorder with him the night that he disappeared? Has that recorder ever been found?
That Jeannie, or not Jeannie, but Kim ended up with that recorder. But there was nothing. She claims there was nothing on it.
All right. So we are led to believe that wherever he was going that night, he did not take the recorder with him.
Right.
Okay. So finally, we get over to the car. The car was eventually found. Of course, in the meantime, like you said, Kim got married. There were some other things going on. But finally, the car was found. Where was it found? How far was it from where, let's just say, Jeramy lived? What can you tell the listeners about the car?
Okay, so Boise is quite a ways from Mountain Home, Idaho, just as a reference point. You would turn as you get to Mountain Home on, I believe it's Highway 50, and go west into the Bruno Desert. And so about 50 miles from Mountain Home, out in the Bruno Desert, and then off of this little beaten road that hardly looks like a road, and cattle free range out there. And right between two little hills, his car was found, and it was found burnt, clear. There was nothing left of the car. It was just totally destroyed by fire.
So Kim's car was totally destroyed to the point where you wouldn't have been able to get any forensics off of it at all.
No, but one thing that I worried or was concerned about is that the license plates were missing, for one, and right in front of the front license plate, the paint was still visible. That's the only place where the car still had paint or still the metal wasn't melted. And I'm thinking, what if they had taken those plates and they had put their hand to push themselves back up, and maybe they could have gotten fingerprints, but that was never, to my knowledge, that was never done.
Never done. And just in miles or in time, how far is this away from where Jeramy lived? How long would it take to drive to where this car was found?
I'm thinking about 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
So decently far away. Would Jeramy have had any reason to be up in this area at all? Did he know anybody up there? Did he ever go up there to hunt? Anything like that?
Not to hunt, but his dad said that he did construction all over the place, so maybe he did know somebody out there in Mountain Home area. But nobody really knows for sure why he would be there. That's quite a drive just to head out and saying that he was going to go visit the friend who lived in Boise, so that didn't add up much.
Now, you had said before that once this car was found, that then the police, they started looking at the cell phone information, some of these other pieces of information a little bit more closely. What did they find out about Jeramy's cell phone the night that he disappeared, and maybe any bank information, any other information that Jeramy might have, any sort of trail he might have left?
Okay, so there were 2 charges on his debit card. One was for fuel in Mountain Home, and the other one was, I believe it was in Boise or just outside of Boise at a convenience store where he bought snacks, like a drink and a candy bar or something like that. And those charges, everybody got kind of excited because they showed up after he had disappeared, but it was determined that there was just a delay on posting because it was coming up on the weekend, and things moved a lot slower back then than they do now. It would take 2 or 3 days to post to your bank.
Yeah, right. Especially since he disappeared on February 11th.
Right.
So both of those charges were made that night, sometime after he left the house.
Right, and we believe that those probably might have been his charges, the snacks anyway. We're not sure about the gasoline in Mountain Home.
And do you know do you know if he had the type of card where you had to punch in a PIN number, or like, for example, if I go to a gas station to use my card, I either have to type in like my zip code or my PIN for my ATM. Any idea regarding Jeramy's card? Still, for somebody to use his card, would they have needed some code or something? Do you know?
Back then, I don't think they were that strict on putting in the zip code. He might have had a PIN, but somebody might have known that PIN. And it might have just been like a place where he could run the card. I don't know the exact answer to that.
Okay.
But I know that back then things weren't as tight as they are today.
All right. That's something that maybe we need to consider, that if it was a card where you needed a pin, who else might know that pin? Maybe Kim would know that pin, but she's in Las Vegas. Maybe Jeannie might know that pin, possibly. Maybe, just don't know. But if it's something where you just have to type in a zip code, that would be easy enough for somebody to figure out, because that wouldn't be much of a secret. How about his cell phone records?
His cell phone records, the last few calls came back unidentified, and I would imagine those were burner phones that you can't trace.
And were they also made in the vicinity of Mountain Home?
Well, that's the sad part. We thought that they had triangulated or pinged the phone, and we found out in 2014 that they had not done that. And by then it was pretty much too late.
So you had the numbers that he dialed that night, but when you called those numbers, the phone numbers were dead.
Correct. And then I did a reverse search off the databases I use, and they came up that they were like a VoIP or a burner phone or something like that. They couldn't be identified.
Like a track phone, something like that, where you pay by month.
Right.
And how long were those phone calls? Do you know?
Pardon me?
How long were the phone calls?
Just short ones, like possibly just text or a short call where you would call and just say something and then hang up. They weren't even a minute long. They were very short.
And they, once again, they were in the you're not sure where those calls were made from? Do you don't even have any idea if they were made in the vicinity of where he got gas or this convenience store? Did he stop that?
No, there's not a record on the phone bill
of
that.
When they found the car, did the police change their theory as to, they might have been thinking this guy ran away when the car disappeared. Did the police change their theory about what happened in any way?
I think they did, because then they started looking more diligently. They assigned, I think the officer's name was Mo Heatherly. They assigned him, but he was actually, he did polygraph tests, and so he was pretty busy with that. So in his spare time, he kind of looked for Jeramy. But at that point, they pretty much were thinking that he was missing and something foul had happened to him.
Now here's where things get a little interesting and even more complex, if the listeners think it's already interesting and complex already. We've already mentioned Erin Barnard's name in this conversation. I talked to his mother, Vicky, on last week's episode. We went just as detailed as we're being here, very detailed coverage of Erin's case, and I'm not sure that it's as well known as Jeramy's, because Jeramy was covered on the show Disappeared and Erin was not. But I'm just going to ask you a main question, and we're going to just go from there. Is there any proof that Erin Barnard and Jeramy Burt knew each other?
Yes, there is.
There is. Could you please pass on to the listeners that information?
Okay, so I'm just going to go down the coincidences, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
They both lived in Boise, Idaho. They were similar ages. They dated best friends. Jeannie's friend and mentor was Constance Norris.
And hopefully the listeners will remember her name from last week. Constance and Erin had a relationship, and they were both owners in a motorcycle shop. You're telling the listeners that Jeannie and Constance knew each other?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Constance and Jeannie were both attorneys.
All right, thank you.
And Constance mentored Jeannie. And so I know that they did a double date. Constance and Erin, Jeramy and Jeannie to a friend named Shannon's wedding. I know that, well, I've heard, so this is kind of up in the air. I've heard that Jeramy worked on Erin's roof, and Erin's mother did say that she knew that he needed his roof fixed, but she didn't know who fixed it. I heard that Erin had worked on Jeramy's motorcycle, but Jeramy's dad told me that he didn't have a motorcycle, so maybe he worked on his truck or something. That's not very confirmed. But also on one of the recordings, the circumstances were that Jeannie was afraid that she was going to go to prison. And so she is covering herself by trying to throw Shannon under the bus, saying that Shannon did the forgery. And she also got this other guy, I'll just call him by the first name, Don. She wanted him to sign an affidavit saying that Don knew that Jeramy and Erin were selling and doing drugs, and she wanted to ruin their credibility. And this Don guy called Jeramy and told him what Jeannie wanted him to do. And so Jeramy on that recording mentioned Erin, and he kind of stuck up for Erin. So that also lets me know that he does know Erin. And the other thing is that when Erin went missing, and that's when he told Kim and Shannon, if I go missing, I didn't go missing voluntarily. So that's some of the coincidences in the cases that
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would say so. Just to be clear about one thing, you've personally heard the recording where Jeramy mentions Erin. You've heard that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's very compelling information. Let's just clear this up right now. Who is Shannon? Maybe we need to be a little bit more specific on who Shannon is, and on top of that, what year was this wedding where Jeramy and Erin double dated and Shannon was, I guess, the bride? Who is she and when did she get married?
Her name is Shannon. I'd rather not say last name.
You don't have to give her last name. No problem.
So Shannon got married to this. This was a short-term wedding, but she got married in 2004, and so Jeannie and Constance and Erin and Jeramy had come to the wedding. They didn't really get involved in the wedding party or mix with other guests. They pretty much kind of sat there, waited for the wedding to get over, had a drink or two, and then left. So they weren't there very long. So there was no pictures of them. They just came out of respect for Shannon. Because Shannon was recommended by Constance to work for Jeannie as a secretary and assistant. And so that's how Shannon had met Jeramy, is from working for Jeannie.
And so the reason that Jeannie and Constance got invited to the wedding is because they both knew Shannon. And the reason that Erin and Jeramy were at this wedding is because they were both going out with Jeannie and Constance at the time.
Right.
So they just all went as a foursome to this wedding where Shannon got married.
Right.
Okay. Usually at a wedding, there's usually a photographer. Have you ever seen any pictures? Have you ever talked to Shannon? I'm sure she has all of her pictures from her wedding like every woman does. Any pictures of Jeramy and Erin together?
No, not at the wedding. And she said that when they got divorced, they split the pictures up. And because Jeramy, Erin, Constance, and Jeannie were kind of just stayed back, they didn't mingle or anything, and they weren't part of the wedding party, she doesn't believe that there were any that they were captured in. And so and I do talk to Shannon all the time, even like up till the day before yesterday.
Okay. So she knew that you were going to be doing this interview with me.
Yes.
All right. And I thank her for allowing you to do so. And I appreciate, of course, you appreciate you coming on this program. And I appreciate the help that she has given you. That is a big piece of information, I think, in all of this. I can't even begin to explain to you how big of a point I think that is.
What we should probably expound on is how Jeramy and Shannon became close friends. And that's, I kind of touched on it, where Jeannie was trying to throw Shannon under the bus.
Okay, please. Yeah, please. Okay.
And blame her for the forgery. And Shannon was really worried about that and told Jeramy, and Jeramy said that that's not going to happen. And so that's when he decided to record conversation. He was trying to save Shannon. And Erin told attorney that Jeannie was trying to get him to testify against Shannon, saying that he saw her forge documents. And Erin was concerned and went to an attorney, and that attorney, with Erin's permission, called Shannon and told her what was going on with that. So they both kind of protected Shannon from being thrown under the bus and taking the blame for it.
And Erin was asked to testify in Jeannie's trial, but he did not.
He did not.
Okay, but Erin did, having covered this last week, Erin did testify in a totally different trial the year before. It had nothing to do with this. So I don't want anybody to get confused about these different trials. Jeannie's trial and the trial that Erin actually participated in, two totally different things. Did Jeramy start to record these conversations with Jeannie because of Shannon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he did. He wanted to catch her and have proof that Shannon didn't do it.
Yeah, that didn't do it. What was happening was Jeannie was trying to push her mistake off on her secretary, her assistant, and blame it on her and get out of the charges. And that, of course, didn't work. And that's why Jeannie ended up going to jail.
Right.
Okay. Does Shannon, if you can say, if you feel comfortable, you don't have to answer this, or you don't have to answer for her. Because of that, did Shannon ever get any threatening calls? I mean, I can imagine as soon as this all popped up, Jeannie couldn't have been too happy about all of this. Was Shannon ever fearful for her life or anything like that regarding any of this?
I don't know that she was fearful for her life, and so I'm not going to say that. But I know that there were times that she probably worried a lot. And there was an incident where she was driving down the road and she saw Jeannie coming, like in the other lane, coming towards her, and like Jeannie had put down the visor. She didn't know if she was being stalked or whatever, but she couldn't think of any reason why Jeannie would be on that road, on that same road at the same time that she was. And then there was another incident where somebody had called her late at night she became a real estate agent. So somebody called her late at night, wanted her to come and look at a house out in the country. And she kind of got fearful over that, just suspicious, and said no.
So she didn't go to it. She thought that this might be a setup. She was trying to be lured to go somewhere, and so she didn't end up going. Do you remember where this location would have been? Would it have been anywhere near Mountain Home?
It was near Mountain Home out in the Bruno Desert.
Okay, would it have been anywhere near where Kim's car was ended up being found?
Exactly.
It was close to there. The place that she was trying to get lured to, this piece of property, whether it was being sold or not, you're saying was close to where the burned out car was found.
Yes. So there's a little town out there near where Jeramy's car was found on Highway 50 called Bruno. And so it was out around that area.
I'd have to think that that's more than a coincidence. I'm gonna just say this publicly to you and to the listeners. Man, that seems very strange. Does Shannon remember what year that might have been that happened?
I think that was, I think that was just before the trial or just after. I'd have to look up those dates again.
Okay. But it was
So-
before Jeramy disappeared.
Or just after. I'm thinking just after.
Just after Jeramy disappeared. So we have Shannon who gets the suspicious call. You're believing probably a little bit after Jeramy disappeared. This does set up a question that I think that the listeners are wondering about, as am I. Did Jeramy know, being that Jeramy, and we're pretty sure that Jeramy and Erin knew each other, and you have said that Jeramy said at one point, I know Erin disappeared if I disappeared. Can we expound on that a little bit? Did Jeramy ever offer up any theories as to why Erin disappeared? Any reasons? Ever mention any names? Did he talk about it to Kim, to his parents, his friends, anybody? Did he ever talk about Erin's disappearance to anybody?
According to Shannon, who talked with Kim quite a bit, Kim said that there was more to the conversation, but Shannon doesn't remember, other than Kim was worried about it, and all they could remember was that he had said that if anything happened to him, it wasn't an accident, something to that effect.
But being that we don't really know how well Erin and Jeramy knew each other. There's no record of them hanging out on their own. The reason they might have known each other was because their two women that they had relationships with knew each other. And it might have been through that. Please.
One of the reasons I think that they were just acquaintances and knew who each other was and maybe had a conversation when they were with the two women. I just don't think, and maybe doing Erin's roof, but we're not sure exactly on that. That was just kind of a rumor going around.
Yeah.
But most people that were really close to Erin called him Benji or Bench.
Yeah, that's right.
So on the recording, he doesn't mention him as Benji or Bench. So he called him Erin. And when he said Erin disappeared, it wasn't using his nickname. So that leads me to believe that they were more than acquaintances, but they were not friends.
Yeah.
They were not like somebody they've seen in a grocery store and kind of knew their name, but somebody a little more intimate, but not friends.
They just happened to know each other because the women that they were dating were friends. And it very well could be that them going to that wedding together, that might have been the first time they met each other. We just don't know.
We don't know.
Jeannie could have said, "Hey, I'm going to bring my boyfriend Jeramy." Constance says, "Hey, I'm going to bring this guy I'm going out with, Erin." And then they get together, they go, and that's the first time these two meet each other. We just don't. We just aren't.
Right. Like, why don't we just ride together? Or, just go out here to this wedding. We'll just stay a little while and leave. I can imagine that conversation.
Right. Okay. But still, Jeramy did disappear about, I guess it would be a little over 2 years later. Erin disappeared December of 2004. Jeramy February 2007. Over 2 years later. And I'm just thinking that, being that Jeramy was having a relationship with a woman that he essentially sent to jail, and knowing that Erin disappeared, I would have thought that maybe Jeramy would be a little more cautious than it seems that he was.
Okay,
Any
yeah.
any any insight into that, Marky?
Kind of. The family, kind of, like we mentioned that Jeramy was kind of a go-getter, assertive, kind of an A personality, I guess, as
Mm-hmm.
far as work and very personable. But he'd also been trained as a SEAL in the Navy. And so he just felt like, and he had all these self-defense. He was an outdoorsman, a hunter. And his dad believed that Jeramy's thought probably was that he could protect himself, you know? And so I think the family kind of leans towards his thinking in that direction. Well, who's he going to protect himself from? Jeannie? Like maybe he didn't think she might get some help. We don't know.
Okay.
Because Jeannie's a small girl.
Yes. So let's move on to this then, and we're only going to talk about him in very limited terms. There is this guy, Mike Cook. I'm just going to leave it up to you how much you want to say about him. How does he play into all this? And then I want to go back and talk about Kim a little bit more. But right now, Mike Cook.
Okay, can I make a correction first before I
Please.
forget?
Yeah, go ahead.
So on the phone call, you asked me when that was, and I said it was around when Jeramy first went missing. What kicked Shannon suspicions off was this guy wanted to meet out near Bruno, and so she knew that that's where the car was found. So it was just after the car was found. So I apologize. I told you the wrong date.
Okay. All right. Thank you, and I will make sure that the listeners understand it. Thank you for clarifying that. Good.
So that kind of leads into this other guy named Mike, and Mike was a friend of Jeannie's, and Mike lived actually near where the car was found. And so now it's not confirmed that he had anything to do with it, but it just seems like a coincidence. Another coincidence or twist in this whole thing. After Jeramy disappeared, this Mike guy and Jeannie got engaged on Valentine's Day. Now Jeramy disappeared on February 11th. Valentine's Day, as we all know, is February 14th. And so they got engaged. I don't know why that fell apart, but it did. And Jeannie eventually married somebody else. And Mike grabbed his daughter, was going through a custody battle with his wife or ex-wife, and he took his daughter and they went to Alaska.
So Mike Cook got engaged to Jeannie 3 days after Jeramy disappeared, but eventually Mike Cook took off and went to Alaska.
Right. And, well, we'll talk about him a little bit later when we talk about Jeannie's other marriage.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's do that right now. There's two Mikes, so this might get a little confusing. There's Mike Cook that we just talked about, and then there is Mike Hughes. Who is he?
Mike Hughes is her most recent husband. She met him over the internet. He had quite a bit of money, and they hooked up, and they ended up getting married and moving to southern Utah. And anyway, so that lasted quite a while, and it ended when Mike Hughes became suspicious after seeing a lot of information that was sent to him, and plus seeing the Discovery ID show. And then, I mean, he stuck up for Jeannie for a long time, and then it dawned on him that maybe there was more to the story with Jeramy and Jeannie than he was willing to admit. And so they ended up in a very bad divorce in which he was accused of taking a gun to her. And he pled so that he didn't go to prison. But he told us that she actually was the one that took the gun to him, and the police believed her. So that was
but that's what he told you. But in court, he testified to something different.
After they had gone through a lot of court and they were getting a divorce and money's going away, and he's an elderly man in his 70s, and he was ill, and so he'd lost his law practice, the whole bit, and so it was just too much. And finally, he just pled to get a lesser sentence and no jail time.
So, and Jeannie, so he was in his 70s, so he would have been what, 20 some years older than Jeannie, maybe older than that, 30 years older.
Right. Correct.
And there was something that he told you about a phone he found?
He was convinced that packages that were coming in, and then he found this burner phone, and he was convinced the packages that would come in would be burner phones from this other Mike that we just discussed a little while ago.
Mike Cook, yes.
That she had gotten engaged to before this Mike Hughes. So it's confusing.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. She just sounds, even if she didn't have anything to do with Jeramy's disappearance, she just sounds like a kind of a shady character. For going back to the stuff we have actually on the record where she forged a judge's signature.
Yeah.
So that alone is pretty bad.
Pretty much could have her way with men and get them to do what she wanted, is what I'm gathering from the whole. She was also married to somebody before Jeramy situation, and it's purported that she had taken a gun to him, and then she shot at a cell phone and shot it, and so there was a protective order against her for that.
So it's sounds like a little bit of a volatile personality. But how did she know? Do you have any idea how she even knew Mike Cook? They don't sound like two people who would run in the same circles.
I am not sure if Constance was an attorney or she did a case for him. That's somewhere in my notes that I'm not recalling at this second. But I believe it was over some legal matter that either Constance or she handled.
So we have Jeramy disappeared. We have this Mike Cook guy who kind of lives up in the area where both the car was burned out and Shannon was tried to be lured to. And then later on, Jeannie ends up with Mike Hughes, and they have their problems and get divorced, and allegations both ways. And so let's go back to Kim for a moment, just to entertain this idea. Is there anything, your opinion, is there anything, we have to consider this being that she got married not too long after Jeramy disappeared, anything that could point yourself toward thinking that, maybe she had something to do with Jeramy's disappearance? Even though she was in Las Vegas, she ended up getting married to a guy who wasn't in Las Vegas.
Right.
And I remind the listeners of a case that's actually just been solved recently here in Florida, where a guy, Mike Williams, disappeared, and now it's pretty clear that his best friend set him up to kill him so he could marry Mike Williams' wife. That was also a case that was covered on Disappeared. That's the kind of scenario that's going through my head right now. I'm just wondering if you, as a private investigator in the last 10 years, has ever entertained that.
Well, of course, I want to look at all the theories and possibilities and probabilities, because you want to take everything and rule it out. And so I've not ruled it in, but I haven't definitely ruled it out either. And one other thing that worries me about that whole thing is that, the computer thing seemed odd to me, and apparently she got rid of some of his stuff right away.
Right.
And the others, and the marrying the guy right away. And the other thing is that last year she committed suicide. And so, I was wondering if that was guilt or, she was already divorced from the guy that she married right after Jeramy, married to somebody else and had another child. And so I was just thinking that her life was all together again, and things were going good. So I don't understand a lot of that. And like I said, I haven't ruled it in 100%, but I haven't ruled it completely out either.
I guess what we're trying to say is that although Jeannie seems to be a bad person and everything, there are some other possibilities.
Right.
There just are. And, we just don't know. It could be that given that Jeramy had some money problems, maybe he owed money to somebody. And and Jeannie didn't have anything to do with it. Kim didn't have anything to do with it. It very well could be somebody that we just don't know about.
Or somebody that owed him money and he went and confronted them. You just don't ever know for sure until you find out.
All right. And all we're doing is presenting the facts. That's all we're doing here. We're not trying to say necessarily anybody did it. We're just talking about the facts that could have led to Jeramy disappearing. On top of it very well could still be that Jeramy just took off. Seemed to be having money issues. Maybe he felt he needed to get away from Jeannie. Maybe he felt he needed to get away from Kim. He could still be out there somewhere.
I think the one thing that takes me away from that theory is that he loved his little girl so much that nobody believes that he would leave her. He was recording Kim, so in case there was problems and he wanted to get custody. And they say that, he'd comb her hair and then she'd comb his hair and they'd go everywhere together. He'd take her out in the woods when he'd go. And I think he'd take her everywhere. She was just kind of attached at the hip. And they had a really good relationship. So nobody that I've talked to believes that he would have left her.
Right.
That he was a really good daddy.
Okay.
I want to kind of go back to something that was kind of we didn't.
Please go ahead. It's your interview, Marky. What do you want to say? Sure.
When Shannon got that telephone call, and one of the other reasons she didn't go is because she felt like the voice on the other end was Michael Cook. So, and she knew that Jeannie was involved with him, and the theories were jumping around at that time, what could have happened. And so I think that's really important to note that she got this suspicious phone call, and then she thinks it's this Mike Cook.
It could have been Mike Cook. Do you know if Jeramy ever met Mike Cook?
I don't really know if he did or not.
That would be.
It's a great possibility. If he's hanging around Jeannie's office, if he's a friend of hers, and Jeramy's hanging with Jeannie, it's a very good possibility that they knew of each other, possibly.
And I know that. And I know that I asked you, I don't have this in my notes, but I know that I asked you, to your knowledge, does Mike Cook have any sort of criminal record?
I don't know. I haven't run his background to see, but I know that he's an arrogant person. He just very. But then this is coming from his ex-wife, okay? So.
That has to be factored in, of course. Yes.
That he's very arrogant, that he's kind of a know-it-all, and that he's a very small man, but he has to drive a big truck, and just kind of boisterous. Is that the word? anyway, he talks loud. He gets right in people's faces, in their space. And so this comes from the ex-wife. So how much of that do you take into consideration?
None. The only thing that I take into consideration is that he was friends with Jeannie and that he lived
Mhm.
close to where the car was burned out and lives close to where Shannon was trying to be lured to. Those are the only things that in my mind
Right.
are the major points.
Right, and
Yeah.
that he had called her and tried to
Yeah.
lure her out there.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
if
I
we're to
think that's
believe that it was him. Yeah, sure.
right. So,
I want to ask you one more thing about these recordings that Jeramy did. In any of them, did Jeramy, in talking to Jeannie or Kim or any other person, that any recording that was found on that laptop, did he ever offer up his own theory as to what happened to Erin Barnard?
you know what? I don't remember that, but let me tell you, I had tried to get a hold of Vicki or talk to her way back when I got Jeramy's case and got permission from Boise, Idaho, to help Vicki with that case. And Vicki at the time just was not ready
Yeah.
for that. And so she just recently called me and asked me to come help her. And so I need to go back through Jeramy's stuff as it pertains to Erin and see, because I wouldn't have been listening for that per se. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Back in the
Yes.
beginning.
Yes.
And so and all the papers, I need to go back through all of that because it didn't. Some things may not have been relevant then that are now. And so I'm really trying this week to go back through and see with fresh eyes if I missed anything and if there's anything pertaining to Erin now that I have that case as well, and then so many coincidences of them knowing each other and at least as acquaintances,
Yeah. Yes.
knowing each other and things like that. So those little things may not have been relevant, and I just skipped right over it. So now I'm going to dig deeper and see if there was anything that tied them.
All right, and you might,
Most
as you're listening
definitely.
to them, you might find that Jeramy mentions a guy named Tyler, who of course was Erin's roommate at the time. Maybe
Right.
Jeramy
Or
will mention Clayton, who was friends with Constance, back at the time.
and
Who was.
worked at the motorcycle shop. Correct.
That's right.
At
That's
Clayton.
right. That's right. So, those are that would be very interesting for me to know, and anything that you can pass on to me that you would allow to be, told to the listeners. I'd love to do an update with you at some point, down the road. As we
I'm
continue.
very sure. I'm very sure that I'm going actually to visit with Erin's mom this next week, and we're going to go over the case with a
Okay.
fine-tooth comb.
Okay.
And so I know that as I dig into this and I talk to witnesses, there will be more information that I'd be happy to share with you what I'm allowed to share, what I can
Okay. Great.
without
Great.
jumping into the case. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. And I would love to do an update because there are certainly, the listeners in my program, the listeners, I don't offer up a lot of theories. I allow the listeners to make the decisions for themselves.
Right.
And it'll be up to them to determine if they think the disappearances of Jeramy and Erin are related or not. You and I and myself and Vicky, all we're doing is presenting the facts. Did they know each other?
Right.
Didn't they know each other? Where were they? What were they doing? Who said this? Who did this on this day? Who said what? What recordings did Jeramy make? What was Erin saying? What was going on in Erin's life? That's the information that I try to get out of both in my interviews, both you and Vicky, and it's up to the listeners to determine for themselves. And any information that we can add on to what we've done here today, I will gladly present to them if you allow me to.
Sure. And
Okay.
I'm pretty sure as we go down this road, there's going to be more information about Jeramy as well. So maybe we can do a back-to-back on that as we go down the road and keep
Okay.
your listeners up to date as much as we can.
Okay.
And I know maybe there's somebody out there that knows something that just happens. They don't know they know yet until they listen. for these recordings. So
That's always a possibility. That's always what we're hoping for on Unfound. Always.
that would be
Always.
a great thing
Yeah.
to bring these boys.
Yep. And it may just be, we have to keep open to the idea that this could be just some statistical anomaly. Two guys who at least went to a wedding together who disappear a little over 2 years apart. And it could be that both of them are totally separate instances, have
Oh,
nothing to do with,
absolutely.
absolutely. But once again, all we can do is look at the information and see what we can get out of it.
Right, and we have to look at all the theories and until we can exclude them as a possibility.
Okay.
It's a and to exclude them as a probability rather than a possibility.
Yes.
So,
in your experience for being a private investigator for these years, is this probably the most complex, most involved case that you've worked on, Marky?
no, I don't think so. I think the first one where the woman had been gone since 1939, I think that was the most complex because they didn't keep records back then. They didn't even have Social Securities until a few years later. And so it's I think that one was the hardest just because you don't have all the technology now. But I think the scenario for a good romance novel is more in this one.
Okay, with Jeramy and Jeannie. That's the part that even if Jeannie had nothing to do with this, we just don't know. That is something that's always going to be in this case of a guy and a woman getting back together after he sent her to jail.
Right. And
good.
Just months later, not even a year, months later, then he ends up missing.
Yeah.
It just seems very odd to me.
It is.
But of course, we don't know for sure.
Yeah. Does Jeramy have a website or Facebook page? And of course, I want you to mention your Facebook page for your own personal nonprofit organization as well. What can you tell the listeners about all of that? Okay.
So we haven't found MySpace would have been, of course, Facebook wasn't really around then, but MySpace he would have had, but he didn't have one that we found. So we didn't have all these Pinterest and any of those other ones either. So that makes it more difficult when you can't trace digitally, know, and they've been gone so long that you just can't pull records anymore.
I guess what I'm asking you is there a Facebook page set up for Jeramy's disappearance now?
There's actually two. There's one, Help Find Missing Jeramy Carl Burt, and his mother's put up one, Help, I think it's Find Missing Jeramy Burt, something like that. You can find it on Facebook. I'll just type his name in, Jeramy Carl Burt. And then he's on our website where We Help the Missing, and that address is wehelpthemissing.org, and he's on there in our missing person page. So
okay, and you have a Facebook page. I know I've been to your Facebook page on Facebook as well. I've been there.
We have www.com or .facebook/We Help the Missing.
Okay. Any last? Excuse me. Go ahead, please.
They're welcome to look me up on my personal Facebook as well. It's facebook.com/Marky Davis. MARKI.
MARKI, and I'm sure that I will be posting about you. And when this episode is going to be coming out the week before, I will be letting know who the interview is going to be with and your capacity with the Jeramy's family. So you can be sure that people will be checking out your website and Jeramy's Facebook page, and probably friending you as well. Any last words before we conclude this interview, Marky?
I just want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to raise awareness about Jeramy and Erin. I'm just really happy with anybody that wants to talk about the case and get their names out there. And it helps the family as well.
It's my pleasure to do it. I've certainly enjoyed talking to you, Marky. We've been communicating for, I guess, for a couple months now. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And that was my interview with Marky Davis, private investigator for the Burt family. I thank Marky for being on the program, and I thank the Burt family for allowing her to speak to me. If you watched the Disappeared episode regarding Jeramy's disappearance, maybe in preparation for this program, I think once again Unfound delved much deeper than that TV show did. And I think we added some complexity to Jeramy's disappearance. The perpetrator, if there is one, isn't as obvious as everyone thinks. For example, Disappeared never mentioned that Kim got married shortly after Jeramy disappeared, even before her own car was found. Why didn't Disappeared tell you that? Because she was one of the people who appeared on Jeramy's episode. This is why on Unfound, we do things just a little differently than Disappeared does. What I'm going to do now is something I don't like to do on Unfound, and that is give you my in-depth opinion on all of this. I don't generally do what I'm about to do because I've seen what happens when I air my opinions. It seems like everybody suddenly thinks like I do. And I hate that. I really do. I think that happens because people think there may be information I'm holding back that is shading my opinion on this or that. And it's kind of like, well, Ed must know something we all don't know for him to come up with that opinion. Whereas I can honestly tell you, 99.9% of what I know is given to you by the guests every episode. That's the truth. Meaning, you don't need my opinion to make your own. You are smart people, and I want free, unencumbered thinking to be happening out there. Thus, I save my opinions for the Patreon blog, where only a few people are. And I write there because people continuously ask for my opinion, so I feel like I have to do at least something. Having said all that, I'm going to break my own rule because all of you have been more than patient sitting through like 5 hours of Jeramy's and Erin's cases, and I've surely touted these two cases as being connected, and you deserve to know why. So I need to explain myself and why I think like I do. So, here it goes. The way I see it, we have three choices. Number one, Erin and Jeramy's disappearances, no matter what happened, are totally unconnected, and the two just happened to know each other. Number two, Erin and Jeramy's disappearances are explicitly connected, meaning they both disappeared or were made to disappear for the same reason, and them knowing each other was a huge factor. Number three, Erin and Jeramy's disappearances are implicitly connected, meaning Erin disappeared, then Jeramy disappeared, for whatever reason, as a result of Erin's disappearance. In other words, if Erin doesn't disappear, neither does Jeramy. And it can't be the other way around because Erin disappeared first. And the two knowing each other was a contributing, but not major, factor. Allow me to analyze each choice, starting with number one. The problem I have with choice number one is that most of you, a high percentage majority of you, in this audience don't even personally know one person who disappeared. Well, the people in Jeramy's and Erin's circles know two. And I don't mean someone like Constance or Jeannie who each may have had an axe to grind. I mean someone like Shannon, a person who is surely an innocent bystander in all of this. And I'm sure if we dug deeper, we could find several other people who knew both Erin and Jeramy who aren't suspected in their disappearances at all. And it would be amongst a group of a few hundred. Whereas I have an audience of thousands, and most of you don't personally even know two people who have disappeared, let alone one. This is what causes me to believe that Erin and Jeramy's disappearances are not totally disconnected. It makes me believe they are connected in some way. So I reject choice number one. Choice number two, that Jeramy and Erin disappeared for explicitly the same reason, meaning whatever reason Erin disappeared for, Jeramy disappeared for the exact same reason. And inherent to this would be that Erin and Jeramy were made to disappear by someone or some group. Now, the only thing I know of that the two were involved in together was the Jeannie Braun case. Jeramy had nothing to do with the poker night stuff or the motorcycle shop, or the gun design, or the pawn shop, or the DJing. Those were all Erin things, and at no point has anyone said Jeramy was connected to any of it, except to say that he might have had his motorcycle worked on at Erin's shop once. That's it. So, if we are to believe that Erin's and Jeramy's disappearances are connected explicitly, then it comes down to Jeannie's case from 2003. But I reject this. Why? Erin did nothing to put Jeannie in jail. That's what Vicky said, that's what Marky said, and Erin said as much to his mother back at the time. It was Jeramy who put Jeannie in jail. He's the one who recorded the conversations, he's the one who testified. So why would Jeannie get someone to make Erin disappear so quickly the next year in 2004 when he had nothing to do with her being found guilty? While at the same time, and this is just a theory, Jeannie would wait 4 long years to get rid of Jeramy, the main culprit in her conviction. That's just too much of a stretch for me. Not to mention that if Jeramy ever got whiff that Erin was made to disappear due to Jeannie's case, he would have been on high alert regarding her. But he wasn't. This tells me not even Jeramy himself thought Erin disappeared due to Jeannie's case. So Jeannie's case couldn't have been the reason for both disappearances. Thus, I reject choice number 2. For all the math majors, that only leaves one choice left. That Jeramy's and Erin's disappearances were linked implicitly. To break it down into logic terms, if A, then B. If no A, then no B. Meaning, if Erin hadn't disappeared, then Jeramy wouldn't have either. This is complex to analyze because it all depends on how you view their disappearances. It also depends on how Jeramy analyzed Erin's disappearance. And that is a fact we don't know. We don't know what Jeramy thought about Erin's disappearance. As far as we know, he never said anything about it. All he talked about was his own possibility of disappearing, which happened. Now, did he say that because he knew Erin disappeared, or because Jeramy was just thinking about himself? We don't know. Like Robert Redford said in All the President's Men, if a man comes up to you on the street and asks you for an address, is he interrogating you, or is he asking for directions? Well, you don't know until you talk to the person more, and we can't do that with Jeramy. All I can truly say is that because I reject choices 1 and 2, I must accept choice 3. So what does that mean? Let's start with Erin's case. I believe he was made to disappear. And if you read my blog at Patreon, I pose what is a very likely scenario, although at this point I have no evidence to back it up. However, my opinion is a culmination of everything I think I've learned about disappearances in the last year and a half. Nevertheless, Erin was made to disappear by someone. We just don't know who. And for whatever reason it is a different reason than the one Jeramy disappeared for. Instead, I think someone took a cue from Erin's disappearance. What that means is somebody suspected that Erin didn't run away. He didn't go to Mexico, didn't go to Canada, didn't go to Montana to join a World's End cult. Somebody in Jeramy's circle suspected, not knew, that Erin was, frankly, murdered. And this person also had some grudge against Jeramy and saw how successful the disappearance of Erin was. And this person or persons decided to make Jeramy disappear too. I maintain that Jeramy doesn't disappear if Erin hadn't disappeared 2 years and 2 months before that. To put it another way, whoever caused Jeramy to disappear in 2007, it might have never entered their mind to do whatever they did if Erin doesn't disappear 2 years and 2 months before that. Now, before all of you say it must be Constance and Jeannie, I am not saying that at all, although that must be considered. There is another correlation between Erin and Jeramy, the mother of their children. For Erin, that's Tracy. For Jeramy, that's Kim. After Erin disappeared, Tracy and John took Ian and went to Seattle, something they wanted to do for a long time. But Erin had gotten in the way of that. For Jeramy, as soon as he disappeared, Kim married another man less than 3 months later, even before her own car was found. What was she to do if Jeramy came back? Here's what I know. Kim knew about Erin's disappearance. I'm sure she and Jeramy talked about it at least once. I'm sure Jeramy told Kim he knew Erin. And Kim knew that no one had been charged in Erin's disappearance, because to this day nobody's been charged in his disappearance. But I'm also wondering if she also knew that Tracy got to live the life she always wanted after Erin disappeared, moved to Seattle, etc. We must also add in that Jeramy had been going behind Kim's back to see Jeannie. And I believe that Jeramy called Kim in Vegas not because he wanted to see her there, but because he wanted to make sure she was there so he could see Jeannie again without getting caught. Did Kim suspect this as well? And did Kim want to live the life that Tracy got to live? We'll never know because Kim committed suicide a few years ago. And here's the key. Tracy wouldn't have to have anything to do with Erin's disappearance for this to all make sense. For Kim, it wouldn't have mattered who or why, only how. Only the results. Erin disappears for whatever reason, Tracy benefits. Maybe Kim wanted that for herself, but didn't want to rely on fate or luck to make it happen, like might have happened in Erin and Tracy's circumstances. And this is the thing about cause and effect. All you can control is the cause. The effect is mostly out of our hands. This is not to distract from Constance, Jeannie, or whoever else. They make good suspects too. And we could go through the same kind of scenarios with them. But the more personal angle I feel has been overlooked in both these cases, Jeramy's and Erin's, and that shouldn't be, because the motives are certainly there. As a final statement on this, at least for this episode, and this is just my opinion, I watched Jeramy's Disappeared program, and for the life of me, I can't square Kim thinking she was going to get her wedding ring back because that's what she said in that episode, while at the same time knowing that Jeannie was still in Jeramy's picture. Likewise, I can't understand how Jeramy thought things were now cool between him and Jeannie after him assisting in sending her to jail. Lots of things that don't make sense in both Erin's and Jeramy's cases. Nevertheless, their cases still come down to the causes you attribute to their disappearances, because we know the effects. So I ask you, what caused their disappearances, and are their cases related? And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a 5-star review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.